In the third part of our voyage along the Brazilian coast, we will discover the coasts of the state of Sergipe, in particular the coastline of the state of Bahia, the longest in the country. In Pirambu, sea turtles can count on the Tamar project teams to give their offspring a chance. In Salvador de Bahia, Mary prepares a acarajé in true candomblé tradition, in the best of tastes. What would the Pelourinho de Salvador be without João and his famous street music group Olodum? In All Saints Bay, Roberto maintains the traditional boats, the saveiros. Near Ilheus, the Terra Vista farming community produces 100% organic cocoa. Through the study of Bahia's corals, Simone hopes to discover the molecules of tomorrow's medicine. Finally, in the Abroge Marine Park, Milton and his team monitor the numbers of humpback whales. The first part of our journey takes us from the Rio S'ao Francisco, cherished river of the Brazilians, to arrive at the superb town of Salvador, passing through Pirambu Beach. Marking the border between the states of Alagoas and Sergipe, the Rio S'ao Francisco has a special place in the collective imagination of the Brazilian people. It has been nicknamed the River of National Unity. Indeed, throughout its 3,000 kilometers, it connects the richer southeastern states to the poorer northeastern ones. The fishermen of the estuary make a meager living here. An image that does little to reflect the economic importance of the longest river in Brazil. Sergipe is the smallest state of the Brazilian Federation. Its coastline is only 160 kilometers long. It consists of long, sandy shores, on which traveling in a horse-drawn cart is above all practical. The population is one of the poorest on the northeast coast, even if local production of farming products such as sugar or oranges is on the increase. This unspoiled coast, untouched by tourism, provides ideal conditions for wildlife to reproduce. This is especially the case in Pirambu. Beaches are ideal nesting sites for certain species of marine turtles. The Tamar project was born in the early 80s to protect these natural habitats. This is where this vast conservation project, which now boasts 20 programs spread over 3,500 kilometers of coastline, was first implemented. Marine turtles keep coming back to their birthplace to lay their eggs, and the reason for this remains a mystery. These migratory creatures seem to have a keen sense of time and direction, which may be connected to the Earth's magnetic field. Once adult, after several years of maturation in the ocean, they find their way to these beaches to lay between 70 and 200 eggs each, depending on their species.
When a turtle looks for a beach, it is to perpetuate the species. It doesn't care about danger, or whether it will succeed or not. Its sole purpose is to reproduce. This is an important value that we need in our life. Sometimes we look to accumulate a lot of things and we forget the essence of life, the goal of every living creature, which is to perpetuate the species. It's a lesson that we can learn from the turtles. The Pirambu beach base is very important for turtle conservation on the coasts of Brazil, as it monitors 80% of the nesting activities of the world's smallest marine turtle living on the coasts of Brazil, the Lepidopteris olivacea.
Augusto, director of the Pirambu base, has always been passionate about marine turtles.
Of the 7 species that exist in the world, 5 live on the Brazilian coast. And on the coast of Sergipe, you can find the olive ridley, the smallest of all sea turtles. We use this grid. It protects them against foxes. Foxes cannot reach the nest, and after the eggs have hatched, baby turtles can go through the holes.
One of the main achievements of the Tamar base was to create a protected area on the beach, where some of the olive ridley turtles' eggs are kept secure until they hatch.
Between 1980 and 1982, when the Tamar teams did their first surveys, they found that almost all of the nests had been plundered by humans. The Tamar project team decided it was very important to set up our base on the nesting areas in order to combat the poachers. An important step of the project was the participation of people from local communities. These people, who once took the eggs for food, today protect them. At first, we worked with the fishermen, as they are the ones who know all about turtles and nesting sites. We, the researchers, didn't know how turtles reproduced. We learned with the fishermen. The second step was to work with their children and grandchildren in the various areas covered by the project. Today, 80% of the pirambu nests are on the beach. There are very few nests in the protected hatchery. Nests that are moved there are the ones that were located in a risk area. These are transferred to protect them. It is essential that turtles make the short trip from the sand to the sea, as it is at this time that they memorize their place of birth, where they will come back to lay eggs as adults. This beach sea trajectory is a very important stage in a turtle's life.
Today, the Pirambu base manages 53 kilometers of coastline and protects 2,400 nests, with more than 100,000 baby turtles born every new season. As with his little protégés, that with a bit of luck will come back here in a few years to lay their eggs, Augusto has forged strong bonds with Pirambu.
I came into unfamiliar territory. I didn't know Pirambu. I came here for work and integrated into this city. I started a family. I had children who now live in the city. My relationship with this place goes on. Life follows its course. For me, this is life. To be at peace with yourself, knowing that you are doing something for the preservation of an animal that is crucial to nature.
Some of the turtles treated at the conservation centre are tagged in order to gather information on their movements. The Pirambu base is one of 4 on the coast of Sergipe, which shows the importance of this coast as a major nesting place for marine turtles. For comparison's sake, the neighbouring state of Bahia, with a coastline stretching over 1,200 kilometres, making it 7 times longer, has 5 bases. North of the state, the paradise-like resort of Praia do Forte is one of the most treasured on the Bahian coast. This is the headquarters of the Tamar project. This centre welcomes 600,000 visitors each year and strives to make them more sensitive to environmental issues by allowing them to discover turtles and learn about the organisation. Today, it is estimated that the centre has released nearly 10 million turtles into the ocean. The utterly charming Coconut Coast, which stretches across 250 kilometres north of the Salvador de Bahia, takes its name from the omnipresent coconut palm trees. Until the 1960s, coconut farming represented one of the main local resources. At the end of this stunning coast, bordering the Atlantic on one side and All Saints Bay on the other, lies the triangular peninsula, with the city that is sometimes referred to as the capital of happiness, Salvador. A metropolis of 3.5 million inhabitants, at first glance, the country's 7th largest city looks like many other Brazilian cities, bursting with skyscrapers. It was the capital of Brazil between 1549 and 1763. And in recent decades, it has enjoyed an economic boom, thanks to industry, but also to tourism. As is often the case in Brazil, a city's decline enables historical district to be saved from destruction. It was the case with Salvador. Its colonial centre, nicknamed Pelourinho after one of its districts, is surely the finest in South America. It is particularly rich in great Renaissance and Baroque styles, religious buildings and beautiful multicoloured houses. A little further north, the peninsula of Itapajipe houses the most famous church in the city, the Church of Nosso Senhor de Bonfim. In January, it hosts Salvador's greatest religious celebration, a syncretic festival in the style of Bahia and Brazil, incorporating into Catholicism many elements inherited from the African religions of the first slaves. In Salvador de Bahia, once the hub of the slave trade under Portuguese rule, different populations have mixed their traditions. There are more black people in this city than in any other in South America, and it is proud of that fact. Salvador remains very African, particularly in its music, rhythms and beliefs. There are many songs about typical characters, such as the Bayanese woman, always dressed in traditional costume and certainly one of the country's most popular figures. On the Plaza de Sé, in the heart of Pelourinho, Mary prepares acarajés, as do her fellow women. The first batch is for the orishas of the Candomblé, the gods of one of the most popular Afro-Brazilian religions in the country, and to which the Bayanese people are traditionally linked.
I prepare the acarajés to make an offering to Lança. I have asked for her protection. The acarajé is an African speciality. Black women cook them to pay homage to Lança. They are called fireballs because Lança symbolizes fire and lightning. In Candomblé, oricas are African divinities that black people still worship today. Those who belong to Candomblé worship the oricas and believe in their power and protection. Today, the oraque has become an intangible heritage. The Candomblé is a very strong religion. Before, only Lança girls were allowed to sell oraques. Unfortunately, nowadays it has become a business and there are conflicts because some people want to sell oraques without knowing their meaning. They even want to change their name, but it's impossible because it's our heritage. My grandmother was Bayanese. At the age of 11, my mother was already selling araques on the Plaza de Sé. My sister and I were born into it. At the age of 7, I was running our shop. My grandmother belonged to Candomblé, but we had not been initiated. I know I'm related to Candomblé, but I lack the courage to take it on. Here is fried araque. You open it and you can put whatever you like inside it. It's up to you.
É opcional, entendeu? A gosto do cliente. Bota pimenta.
Do you want hot pepper in it? Everything we do in life we should do with love. I think I'm here for a reason. We choose our way of life. I'm here because I wanted it and I love what I do. This cream is vadapa. Wheat flour, shrimps, onions, ginger, oil. The Bayanese is always cheerful and full of energy. We treat our tourists well. We warn them about danger, we guide and we give them advice, like social workers. Dried shrimps fried with onions. Your araque is ready.
Salvador and its enchanting Pelourinho charms us with their rich decor, which was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1985. In these streets from another era, you come across capoeira players, this combat in the form of dance that came from Angola 4 centuries ago. Signs of faith are everywhere. To honour this faith, evangelistic congregations, such as the Franciscans, didn't hesitate to build splendid shrines, like the S'ao Francisco monastery.
Você é a luz.
A small architectural jewel, strewn with gold and with a profusion of floral and other sculptural ornamentations. This church reflects the Baroque ideal of the late 18th century. The Pelourinho, which means little pillory in Portuguese, was the heart of the colonial city, where the rich sugar lords lived. From the windows of their luxurious homes, they could watch slaves being tortured. Although capoeira demonstrations have thankfully replaced this frightful spectacle, and although the historic centre is now protected and partly restored, poverty and insecurity have long been a critical problem. Through the actions of the Olodum Group, things have changed, as President João Jorge explains.
We are in Salvador's grandest street, in a city that once was Brazil's capital. We are in the Pelourinho district, the cradle of the Black Rome, the cradle of Bahian and Brazilian civilization, with streets going back to Portugal's colonial era in 1549. The Olodum Group was born here in 1979. It's a team that has come out of the Carnival Group, and it has created a school and a theatre group, and is socially very active in the district. This Afro-Brazilian percussion group helps reinforce Brazilian identity and helps combat racism.
Symbolized by the peace sign and African colours, Olodum has today become an institution in Salvador and in the Pelourinho, as it has actively contributed to transform the district. What was yesterday a dangerous neighbourhood, full of misfits and prostitutes, today has become a tourist area, full of restaurants, art galleries, and all kinds of boutiques. It is an active celebration of Afro-Brazilian identity and culture.
In the 1970s, the decline of the neighborhood was evident. Houses fell into ruin, people felt abandoned, there was a lot of violence and police repression. What Olodum has done is re-socialize the neighborhood and helped it to be designated as a World Heritage Site. It did so by restoring the dignity of its people and by affirming that living in the Pelourinho mattered, as it has a strong bond with the city and the rest of the country. And finally, by restoring the Pelourinho Afro-Brazilian identity. Without its black community, without the Pelourinho, Bahia would not be Bahia. And without Bahia and the Pelourinho, Brazil would not be Brazil. School plays an important part in reinforcing the bond with our African identity, with African culture and the history of its dispersion. At school, each individual learns about his own history. We are not Europeans, we are not natives, we are not only African. We are natives, African, European, and we have African roots. If you don't have this consciousness, you can't reflect on your rights, on your duties, on police violence. You can't reflect on your own culture, on your education, on your personal development. Afro-Brazilians are entitled to the wealth of Brazil. Brazil is a very rich country, and we must share this wealth with the indigenous population, with Afro-Brazilians, with Eastern people, with those who came from the Azores and with the poor whites, in an egalitarian fashion. It's a school of equality working for equality.
O poema que restou do poeta que deixou uma linda magia pairando no ar.
Every Sunday we rehearse at 3 p.m. It's a collective gathering to dance, to meet people and prepare for the carnival. It is also an opportunity for people from different neighborhoods to meet in the heart of Salvador, in the magical and spectacular center of Brazil's most beautiful capital, Salvador, the Black Rome.
Olodum is famous for mixing musical genres, and especially for giving birth to what has been called samba reggae. Its reputation in Brazil is established, and the group has performed with international artists like Paul Simon and Michael Jackson. To leave the steep streets of the Pelourinho and go to the harbour without too much effort, just take the famous La Seda elevator, which was installed in 1873 and has since been modernised. In the small harbour of the lower town, coming out of the elevator, we meet Roberto, nicknamed Malacca, and his crew to discover another aspect of Baianese history. A sailing enthusiast, Roberto takes us aboard an ancient boat, the Sombra da Lua, the shadow of the moon. It's time to hoist the sails.
We are in All Saints Bay, in a splendid setting, on a Saveiro, which is a traditional boat.
Saveiro com a embarcação tradicional.
The Saveiro only exists in that region. It has been recognized as a Brazilian cultural heritage. I'm Roberto Bezerra, civil engineer. I manage bars and restaurants, and I'm also a surveyorist, thanks to God. We have created an association for the preservation of the Saveiro. Let me tell you the story of these boats that arrived here in 1560. The Portuguese colonizer needed to transport merchandise from the countryside to Salvador. That would then be sent to the European court by caravel.
As caravelas levassem para a corte, para a Europa, através de uma necessidade.
The Saveiro was therefore created because of that requirement. It carries cargo. You could compare it to a 16-ton truck. It is fast, and you can do 7, 8, 9 knots without difficulty, and has already reached 15 knots. It's a sturdy boat. The Portuguese brought all the knowledge about the construction of this boat from India and China.
The saveiros measure up to 15 meters long. Each part of the boat is cut from a specific timber, selected from rare exotic woods, for instance, jaqueira. Cut according to the lunar calendar, these woods have to be buried in mud first of all, for them to acquire some resistance and flexibility. The large square cotton sail is hand-sewn and covered with lime.
When there is a load on board, it takes 3 people to lift the sail and to moor the boat. There is no engine. Everything is done by manpower. You have to push the boat out. And if there's no wind, you have to row. Sometimes, depending on the wind, the voyage can last 2 days. You have to prepare food and then do the dishes. Yes, you need 3 people to sail this boat. I've been sailing on saveiros since 1959, and I've never heard of an accident, which proves that it's a secure and sturdy boat.
In 1920, there were 1,500 saveiros in the bay. Today, there are only 20, and only 2 shipyards are still capable of constructing them. For Roberto, it is a heritage that must be preserved.
The master carpenters start working at a very young age and don't know how to write very well. Knowledge about the saveiro is transmitted orally. Hello, master.
Hello.
You've still got a lot of work.
Yeah, I'm happy.
And what are you doing?
I'm drawing the plan of a boat.
The transmission is oral, hence the importance of compiling this knowledge in a book to show the beauty of this culture to future generations and to the rest of the world. The Viva Saveiro Association seeks to preserve this culture and this history so that it doesn't disappear, because Saveiro has lost its function of transporting cargo. It has nothing to transport, and so it's destined to disappear. We are going to create a museum, and we are currently editing a book. Even artists get inspiration from the saveiro. It's a way to keep it alive. This boat, the Sombra da Lua, was recognized as a national cultural heritage. This saveiro belongs to the Brazilian people.
We leave Salvador de Bahia and All Saints Bay for the region of Ilheus, the former Brazilian capital of cocoa. South of Salvador stretches the coast of Dendê. Dendê is the famous Portuguese noun for the Guinean Ilheus, a tree that provides the famous palm oil, so sought after by the food industry worldwide, and which has been the subject of much controversy recently. This coast has a strong touristic vocation, but nevertheless provides the precious space necessary for the development of this high added value farming. Situated 450 kilometers from Salvador, the city of Ilheus does not make its fortune from palm oil, but from cocoa, as it was a great trading hub for that commodity in Brazil. The city is famous for its architectural heritage, as well as its history of great opulence, and for being the home of Brazil's greatest writer, Jorge Amado. Several of his novels are actually set in Ilheus. The installation of a new deep water port and computer-related industries has compensated for the sharp decline in cocoa farming, which was ravaged by a fungus in the 90s. Although the city's activities have diversified, the cocoa industry is still active in Ilheus. However, Bahia remains the biggest cocoa producer in Brazil. Away from the coast, in the primary Atlantic forest where cocoa grows in the shade, some communities from the MST, the famous landless workers movement, have established themselves in the old farms. With the help of the Cabruca Institute, an NGO that Claudio works for, the Terra Vista Group has set up production techniques that respect the environment under the leadership of its manager, Joelson.
Welcome to the Terra Vista Group. It was created in 1992, and in 1993 we decided to build this school. Today it's the Milton Santos Agricultural Training Center. When we occupied this land, we realized that it wasn't enough to have land. We had to be productive. Then we realized that production and education were linked, and that it was essential to combine three elements together: education, the farming of the land, and agroforestry. We have embarked upon this path now, and education is an essential part of it, as it's a means of improving the living standards of farmers, as well as offering a perspective of change for mankind.
De humanidade. Estava explicado já pouco sobre a importância de recuperar essa.
In the late 1980s, in the state of Bahia, a fungus caused the disease known as the witch's broom. It devastated cocoa production. In a way, it's thanks to this disease that the MST, the landless workers movement, has been able to come here. If it hadn't devastated the region, the MST would never have been able to occupy this unproductive land. This region accounted for over 70% of the Bahian economy. Cocoa producers were all powerful, they had the means to drive us out. But as the land no longer produced, they just didn't bother.
Here, cocoa is cultivated both in the garden and in the forest. A good example of agroforestry.
Everything we collect is taken to the nursery where beans are processed and then sowed, just behind me. Young shoots remain in the nursery between 3 to 6 months, depending on the species. And then they're ready to be replanted in the fields.
With the leftover beans, we make good quality chocolate that we can sell. And this offsets the losses suffered from the cocoa's witch's broom disease. This is the agroforestry system we've been working with for 12 years. Cocoa's bond with the forest and with nature is very important. We've been able to improve our living conditions, to produce sustainably, and we have become a reference in agroforestry.
Here we have a Cabruca production system, where in the foreground you have the cocoa trees and in the background you have Atlantic forest trees. The Cabruca system is essential because it preserves biodiversity, maintains soil moisture and provides room for vegetation and livestock. It's a balanced production system. Created in 2007, the Cabruca Institute offers technical assistance to production areas, both to groups of producers or to independent producers.
In Terra Vista, organic farming gives the children of the region a future that could well become Brazil's reference in organic cocoa production.
It's a community production zone where decisions are taken collectively. Products are stored centrally and then sold. We bring our technical know-how to the production process, but we also help with the transformation and marketing of products.
The next step in our exploration of the Bahian coast is the Discovery Coast, and more specifically, the area of Porto Seguro. Stranded on the beach of Porto Seguro, this caravel is a reminder of the first landing of Portuguese sailors in Brazil on the 22nd of April 1500, hence the name of Discovery Coast. The very foundation of Brazilian history, the town of Porto Seguro welcomes many tourists, attracted by its status of national heritage, given by the state in 1973. In addition to the historical sites uptown, the lower town still boasts many beautiful buildings from the colonial era. The mouth of Rio Burayem enables one to sail upstream along the river to explore the different ecosystems of the Mata Atlântica, the rich Atlantic rainforest, or to explore the seabed. Indeed, the Discovery Coast is renowned for its abundant coral reefs. A few kilometers south of Porto Seguro, Arraial da Ajuda's small station was the birthplace of the Coral Vivo research project in 2005. In Portuguese, living coral. Simone and his colleague Cristiano go there regularly.
I am a molecular biologist and I work at the Catholic University of Brasilia in the Department of Biotechnology and Genome Sciences. We work in the bioprospection of plants and microorganisms. We are looking for molecules and substances that can be used to fight bacteria causing nosocomial infections. We do this research with the support of the Coral Vivo project, which is an environmental, educational project, as well as a scientific research project. Its objective is to show the public the importance of coral, hence the name, living coral. Corals are animals, living beings, and they're very important for the coral reef ecosystem.
For about 10 years, Simone has been trying to isolate certain proteins produced by different species of corals. One in particular is at the heart of his research.
We chose the species that have been effective in combating microbes. This is the species Filigorgia dilatata, also called elephant ear. We seek to develop new antibiotics from natural products, from corals, which will eventually replace present antibiotics that bacteria have become resistant to.
Substituir esses antibióticos que estão sendo usados, pelos quais as bactérias já têm resistência.
We are also doing research on sea urchins. Sea urchins have an internal cavity called a colon. It is known to contain immune defense cells.
Cavidade interna, que é o celoma. Dentro desse celoma, existem algumas células, os celomócitos, de defesa.
One of the objectives of our study is to find out whether some of these defense cells can be used as medicine.
Utilizadas como medicamentos.
Coral Vivo was deliberately implemented in an ecologic touristic park. Simone and Cristiano deposit the samples they've collected in the station's laboratory. Different fragments and substances are extracted and then analysed. Thanks to these analyses, Simone was able to prove that a coral protein could be used to fight against KPC, a superbacteria that caused the death of 110 people in Brazil between 2010 and 2011.
Here, we assist coral spawning in captivity. We also try to raise awareness amongst the local population and tourists in order to preserve the ecosystem. Coral takes a long time to reproduce and grow. It's easier to preserve it than to try and reconstruct what has been destroyed.
Our idea is to help produce new drugs. It would be very beneficial to our society if a greater number of people, especially the poorest ones, had access to these medicines.
Pouco acesso aos hospitais possam utilizar esses medicamentos.
Between Arraial da Ajuda and the neighbouring Trancoso, the coast is lined with beautiful ochre orange and white cliffs, sometimes reaching 45 metres in height, adorned with fragments of the Atlantic forest or palm trees that have been planted where the forest used to be. It has been said that the Discovery Coast boasts the most beautiful beaches in the state of Bahia, situated between Salvador in the north and Rio and Sao Paulo in the south. It attracts hordes of young Brazilians seeking a never-ending party in a protected setting. Situated off the beaten track, it was ignored for a long time, but is now sought after by the tourist industry because of its vast unspoiled spaces. An example of this is the Trancoso Golf Course. Designed by a team of American designers, this is a must for wealthy amateurs who come here for a round of golf between the coastal cliffs and the forest. Some historians believe that the mouth of Rio Trancoso is the real Portuguese landing site in Brazil. To this day, it is still relatively well preserved. The last leg of our journey is the Whale Coast and the Ilheus National Marine Park. The estuary of Rio Caravelas is one of the main embarkation zones for the Ilheus archipelago, located about 60 kilometers into the sea. Listed as a natural park, Les Ilheus is a site for many humpback whales who come here from the month of June onwards to give birth and nurse their young. For Milton, it is a paradise.
Ever since I was little, I wanted to work with marine animals. Whales and dolphins have always fascinated me. I chose to become a vet because I have always loved taking care of animals. It's important to have dreams and to fight for them. I preserved and managed to make my dream of working with whales come true, here in Abrolhos. You can't be indifferent to the sight of a whale. I've been doing sea outings for more than 15 years to watch whales, and every time it's as though it was for the first time. To see a 30-ton whale doing somersaults in front of you is overwhelming. You're taking pictures on the boat, and all of a sudden you cry out with emotion when you see a whale jump. Every day you discover new things. Daniela Mello is a veterinary doctor who studies whale hormone rates. This small chunk of fat will enable her to monitor the amount of testosterone, progesterone and estrogen, which are their sex hormones. With this information, we'll know the percentage of whales that breed each year and see if this percentage is declining or increasing, and whether it suffers under human impact.
Milton, director of the Baleia Jubarte project, and his team tirelessly study the behavior of humpback whales in order to preserve them at all costs. Today, these hydrophones will enable them to gain better knowledge of whale songs.
Their song is extremely important in the breeding season. We want to know what their frequency is and what their structures are, in order to identify which human actions could adversely affect the communication between whales.
After centuries of fierce hunting, the humpback whale is unfortunately one of the world's marine mammals that is most in danger of extinction.
Humpback whales have been hunted for a long time, and in the 1960s there were only 1,000 left. Fortunately, their population has risen in the last 10 years. We've recently registered about 7% growth, and we think that there are about 14,000 humpback whales on the coast of Brazil. Seeing a whale you've seen before is like meeting an old friend. It's very pleasant because the effort that has gone into the conservation of the species in general becomes an effort to preserve one particular whale. What impressed me the most was the way the whale not only cared about her baby, but also her concern for that man. You saw how the whale came between the diver and her baby. She held back her body so as not to hurt the diver. It's fascinating to watch the behavior of this wild animal. It weighs several tons and is concerned about the fate of a 50 to 80 kilogram man swimming next to him. It's a lesson for mankind. If a whale is capable of respecting an animal much smaller than it, then it should be an obligation for us to respect other animals.
With these shots of the faces of our Bahian friends, we close the third part of this program, dedicated to the coasts of Brazil.